Scoreboard here on Heart of Ohio Sports. Nate Mullins in studio with Zach Baker once again. And we got the wizard Greg Kinn on the ones and twos keeping us live. Thanks for tuning in here on Heart of Ohio Sports. Make sure if you're watching the video with us, do us a favor. Share the video first and then like and follow, subscribe, all that good stuff. But help us out by sharing the video. Help us reach a new audience. All right, we've got a lot to break down, a lot to discuss from last night. It was a busy night in high school football. And as you can tell, my voice is a little raspy this morning because I did 2 games last night. We did 2 games last night. We actually did 3, but the adrenaline stream had to do 2 games last night. So back-to-back games at Frost County Stadium. Zach, can you remember a time when you ever had to cover 2 games on the same night that wasn't basketball?
Yes. I covered 2 games because there used to be back when Heidelberg played at Frost Cal now.
Okay.
I did a Tiffin game Tiffin University game in the afternoon, and then a Heidelberg game in the evening.
Okay.
They used to it was college football, but yeah, I did 2 games that night, and yeah, it was one of those experiences. I don't think that it's not something that you necessarily plan on,
right?
But yeah, it is. It's a different thing. It definitely is.
And I don't think the colleges scheduled them at 4 and 8 o'clock, right?
No, I think
it was a 1 o'clock game or a noon game, and then a 7 o'clock.
Yeah, I
think
that's what it was. Yeah.
Last night was unique, and it was a lot of fun. Honestly, like it was different for us. We've never done anything like that before. But the preparation for 2 games is a lot because we do 2 streams every Friday. But getting 3 games together, I really got to put it. I got to put my hands together for Greg Kinn. He did an outstanding job this week getting us ready for those games, putting together some crispy graphics, making sure everything was in line, everything was in order. Did a great job, Greg. Thank you once again for everything you do for us. But fun night for us. And a couple of lopsided scores, but we did have a somewhat close game in the nightcap at Frost Cal now. But the 2 other games we had a little bit lopsided. Let's talk about first. We'll talk about the Extreme game because we had the Extreme over at Lakota and Gibsonburg. And after Lakota upended Willard the week before, and the way that they did it, I mean, 33-7, I think was the final in that one. I mean, the way they dismantled Willard in that game had me thinking, okay, Lakota is for real. They have come to play this year. And Mike Lento, he is the same. He's in the same category as I am, where he's a believer in the Raiders. He's always got his guys believing. No matter if they just took a lopsided loss or they get a lopsided win, he's kind of the same guy every week because he knows he needs to bring that for his team and his program. This week surprised me a little bit. I think Gibsonburg might have surprised the Raiders with their game plan. And the fact that Tanner Smith played last night after the injury that he suffered a couple weeks ago against Calvert, I think was an emotional boost for that Gibsonburg team. And they really rode him to a victory last night. And I mean, that was a thorough beating by Gibsonburg over Lakota. But, the Raiders had a couple of bright spots. I just don't think their offensive game plan went the way that they thought.
Well, I think the thing that impressed me last night was just the way that the Gibsonburg defense played.
Yes.
The fact that Lakota was able to kind of assert its will last week, and then you kind of see what happened and what happened with the defense, just being able to kind of stifle Lakota. Yeah. So that was kind of a surprise. I mean, I think you look at Gibsonburg and they have been one of the better teams since they came in to the river. They've been one of the better teams, and so you're not necessarily surprised by the outcome.
No.
But given the fact that Lakota was able to score so much last week against Willard, now of course Willard turned around and gave up 70 this week, but it was still kind of surprising to see Gibsonburg's defense play as well as it did.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, for the Golden Bears, this is a team that, you're looking at the rest of their schedule. They've got Willard next week. They've got Margaretta, and then they close out the season against St. Joe, maybe. The reason I say maybe is St. Joe's numbers are just a little too low right now. And it's who knows what's going to happen week to week with the program. It's nothing against anybody with the program. It's just that's what it is.
Well, and when you're going into week 8, week 9,
yes,
it's hard to get those numbers up at this point of the season.
Exactly.
I'm not talking about. I mean, just guys getting players healthier, getting them ready to get on the field.
Yes.
So,
but you've got Gibsonburg with these last 3 games: Willard, Margaretta, and St. Joe. A chance to possibly finish on a 5-game winning streak. Now, you look at Region 26, and it's tough. There's a lot of jockeying going on, but they're sitting right now at that 17 spot with a chance to sneak their way into the playoffs with a couple of big wins. Now, if they can pick up a win against Willard, that's some computer points. I mean, that's a Division 5 team. They're going to pick up a lot of points from that, and that should move them up in the rankings, you would think. But this is a Willard team that, that Golden Bears defense better be ready to play.
Well, I think Willard is tricky.
Yeah.
I think that with the fact that they've been as explosive as it has been offensively, it's gonna present challenges. Especially, I think the key is just I think the key against Willard is you got to weather the storm.
Yes.
That's what Hopewell Loudon did yesterday. That's what the teams that have done well against Willard, they've been able to do because they have they have weapons, they're able to score, but the defense isn't the greatest. So you just gotta weather that storm and just execute. And if you do that, you're gonna be okay. And I think Gibsonburg, you're right. If you're 17th and you're gonna have the potential to finish and win those last 3 games. Now, again, it could get tricky because that game against St. Joe, like you said. But if those 3 games are played, if they do what they're supposed to do, they're going to put themselves in a pretty good chance to be in the postseason.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And the Raiders, on the other hand, they fall to 3-4, so both teams mirror themselves when it comes to records. But the Raiders have Margaretta next week. They have Fremont St. Joe, and then they have Woodmore. 3 completely winnable games for them. Now, Margaretta played Calvert tough last night. And that's a tough team, and they are physical. And that's not going to be an easy win at all. The Raiders should not chalk that up as a win right now. But
that might be a toss-up game, honestly.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Because it's at the Duck Pond.
Margaret I apologize. I cut in, getting a little. I'm not used to being up at this point in the morning.
No, you're fine.
I try to overcompensate with energy. But no, I think the thing with Margaretta is when I've seen them play over the years, even when they don't have the most talent, it's a toughness.
Yeah.
They bring a toughness, and when I covered them, they didn't always win, but I got the feeling that the teams that they played knew they were in a football game, a tough physical football game, and they're going to give Lakota a game for sure. It's going to be a very good game. But if you're Lakota, and this is just my thought on it, you're playing at this point in the season with some desperation.
Yes.
If you're 3-4 in that division, in that region, you need to make sure that you take care of business so that you can give yourself the best chance to extend your season.
Yeah, because in that region right now, they're sitting at 14. Lakota is.
Yeah.
But there's some really good teams in that Region 22, Division 6. I mean, you start talking about Ashland Crestview, Seneca East, you got Winford. I mean, these are teams that, they might have a record that might say 4-3 or 3-4 at this point, but they've played some really tough competition to this point. And, I say Lakota's played some tough teams too, but when you go into the postseason, you want some of those tougher matchups as you get closer to the postseason so you can kind of measure yourself and see where you're at going into the postseason play. Finishing out with St. Joe and Woodmore at the end of the year, I'm not sure if that's the look they want, but they can only deal with the cards that they're dealt.
You can only play the teams on the schedule.
That's actually absolutely right.
And I do expect this Margaretta game to be a big test for them. And if Lakota can pass it, then they put themselves in a good position.
Yeah.
Definitely.
All right, so we'll move on from the Gibsonburg Lakota game. Zach, where were you last night?
I was in Macomb.
Okay.
Which is Macomb and Arlington are becoming my home away from home lately. I've been to those. I saw Arlington for the 3rd time this season. I saw Macomb for the 2nd time, and got a chance to see Macomb and Braxton Althauser, the running back for the Panthers. He ran for 5 touchdowns, 391 yards, and returned a kickoff 65 yards in a 49-21 win over Arlington. I do want to say Arlington had a big injury in that game. Aiden Cavaney, who was their best player, he ran for 135 yards in the first half and broke off a couple of huge runs. He got hurt. And, and certainly I want to say for myself and for everyone, all prayers to Aiden Cavaney. He's a heck of a player.
Absolutely.
And I hope he's okay because, one of the things when I was talking to Chris Algie last night from Macomb, he's like, he said 21 is the real deal. And 21's his number. Absolutely, he is. And everybody at the game last night was thinking the same thing. We're all thinking about him even this morning, and I hope everything turns out okay for him.
Yeah.
Because he is a dynamic player. But even forgetting about that, these kids, anybody who plays football at the high school level, you're a tough kid.
Yeah.
You're going to put yourself through the rigors of that, and unfortunately, it's part of the injuries are an unfortunate part of the game. And but I want to say that had Aiden Cavney not gotten hurt, and I'm not speaking out of school, Chris Alge, the Macomb coach, said the same thing. Had Aiden Cavney not gotten hurt, the game could have been very different. But Macomb is, they're the two-time BVC champions. Arlington's a very good football team, and that's a big rivalry. And it was fun. Those are the BVC games are that's where I want to be on Friday night. I want to be at the BVC. When I got to Findlay. With Findlay, I feel like you got to take control of the BVC because the BVC is such a Findlay, it's such a Hancock County thing. Heck, Hopewell Loudon was in it a few years ago.
Right.
North Baltimore, the former MAL school, they were in the BVC some time ago. Elmwood is in the BVC now. So it's just a very area conference. And you want to be at the best games. And last night, I felt like that was the big game of the BVC. Next week, Pandora Gilboa plays Liberty Benton. That's the game I'm going to be at. And these games are going a long way to decide not only the BVC championship, but you're playing some good teams, some tough teams every week. It's going to have a lot to do with the postseason matchups.
Yeah, absolutely right. And so where's Macomb sitting right now when it comes to playoff positioning?
Well, Macomb is, I believe they're Region 26, I think.
So we'll take a look. See?
Yeah, they're 5-1. The one loss came to
number 2.
Huh?
They're number 2.
They're number 2. Okay, 5-1, and the thing that Macomb has going for it is one of their chief rivals is Liberty Benton, which is a Division 5 school. Mm-hmm. So, and they've beaten Liberty Benton the last few years. I don't know if they will this year. Liberty Benton's having a great year.
6-1 on the season. Yep.
So they're the Eagles are a very good team. That's the last game of the regular season. Usually that's been the game that has kind of decided things. But you can't say that this year because Pandora Gilboa, with their quarterback Corey Girton, and their group of young receivers is a tremendous offense, and they're certainly in that hunt as well. So. It could go a number of different ways. I mean, Pandora is a D7 school, and so it's very possible. Pandora beat Macomb 2 weeks ago. Very possible that they could match up again in the postseason. They matched up last year, so that's a game that that's one thing you got to keep your eye on. And it's always two different things because the BVC is such a big deal, but also you've got to keep your eye on that postseason. And
Mm-hmm.
I think Macomb is positioning itself to do a very good job. They've got a good defense, but basically they've got a bunch of guys who can run, and it's a run offense. It's a ground and pound, and that is what they've done all year. And I would expect that for the rest of the season we'll see a lot more of that.
They put up 42 points in every game that they've won, at least 42 in every game that they've won. But that loss to Pandora Gilboa, a little lopsided, 42-14.
Well,
was there a reason for that? Or
Well, I think the reason was that one of the things that Pandora was able to do, because Pandora is a pass first. Pandora's quarterback, Corey Girton, can throw for 300, 400 yards a game. He threw for 4 touchdowns when I was there at the Pandora Macomb game. So I think what Pandora is able to do, one of the reasons for their success is a lot of the BVC teams are run. They're run. What Pandora forces you to do is they spread you out. And I think a lot of defenses, and I can't say this for sure with Macomb.
They're not used to practicing against that kind of an offense.
You're not used to seeing that type of pass offense, and I think Macomb struggled with it. They struggled with it last year when they played them in the postseason and in the regular season because they do a really nice job generally against the run, but that's because that's what a lot of teams do. When you spread someone out, it makes it a little bit more difficult to cover, and then when you start hitting on the passing game, then you can go to the run, and they do a good job of keeping you off balance.
Yeah.
So I think that's what Pandora Gilboa does, and Pandora Gilboa has a couple losses, both to really good teams, but yeah, I mean it's going to be very, very interesting to see how the postseason matchups, how they kind of figure themselves out, because Macomb, I think, is better. They probably match up a little better with Arlington because of the fact that Arlington is so run-based. But, you look at Liberty Benton. Liberty Benton's a little bit more, from what I've seen, a little bit more balanced. So it's going to be an interesting matchup for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of talent in Region 26, a lot of really good football teams. You look at the top of that region, and there's 4 undefeated teams. You've got Hopewell Loudon and Tiffin at 3 and 4, and then Antwerp at 5, Waynesfield Goshen at 6. Greggy, you remember that team? A couple of years ago, we covered a Hopewell Loudon Waynesfield Goshen game.
I do.
And they had a huge line. There was a couple kids on that line that were enormous, and we were like, I think they were freshmen at the time, and we were just like basically, admiring how big these kids were, talking about how that's a coach's dream to have that kind of a size advantage in the trenches, and then maybe that's the same team that's now matured and is now seniors. Because you look at this team, you look at their record, they're 7-0 on the season. And I mean, they have put up points in bunches.
Well, they're playing. Here's the one thing you got to keep in mind. And I don't want to throw water on.
No,
Waynesfield
please
Goshen.
do. You got to explain why they're 7-0.
But it is the NWCC, the Northwest Central Conference. Hard Northern is not a bad team. They're pretty decent. But if you look at the rest of it, it's not. That's an area where a lot of these teams, I don't know how they'd match up with a team like a Hopewell Loudon, with a team like a Macomb, say. I don't know how they'd match up. I think it would. My feeling would be that Macomb would out physical them. The NWCC has teams now like Corey Rawson, who's really struggling, North Baltimore, who's really struggled. They've had some. It's definitely Waynesfield Goshen is definitely the best team in that conference, and they're a good team. I just wonder how they'll match up when they get into the postseason and can't see those NWCC teams anymore.
And see, I think that's some people have felt that way about the SBC River for the last few years. It's like there's the top half is very good. There's a couple teams at the top of that river that are always really good.
Yeah.
But then you get towards the bottom, sometimes those top teams, when they make the postseason, they haven't really played anybody to get to that point. That's why you see a lot of these river teams scheduling tougher non-conference opponents at the beginning of the season, because they want to get those computer points, because they know they're not going to come from conference play. So, I mean...
Well, and Liberty Benton does it because they know... Liberty Benton makes a tough schedule early because they know they're in a D6, D7 league for the most part, aside from Elmwood. They're in a D6, D7 league. They're a D5.
Yep.
And it's not just a matter of computer points. You want to get those tests out of the way so that you can so that that you're not going to be playing a different team, different types of teams when you take that step into postseason. Of course, I would argue that when you're playing in the BVC this year, Macomb and Pandora Gilboa and Arlington and schools like that, I mean, they will match up very well with some D5 teams.
Yeah.
But you still want to challenge yourself as much as you can with those early games. Liberty Benton played Columbus Grove, which is a D7, but one of the best D7 teams in the area. So you're going to see some of these tough matchups. Liberty Benton scheduled Elyria Catholic earlier, so you're trying to give yourself the best test that you can, so that you can get yourself ready for what figures to be a very difficult postseason.
Yeah,
it's nice to be in that position where you can think about postseason. When you and I started doing this years and years ago. There were 6 divisions and it was the top 8. Now there's 7 divisions and it's the top 16. What that allows is you have a little more wiggle room.
Yeah.
And you can get hot at the right time. And you remember it was an 18 playoff then, but I mean Clyde in 5-4 was an 8 seed. Just barely got in and won a state title. So it is really about toughening your guys up and peaking at the right time.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And talk about peaking at the right time. Now we'll talk about a couple of games that we were at last night. First, we'll start out with the Columbian game, because that was the first game. Started at 4:30. An unusual start, and there's a lot of questions leading up to that game of, would the early start affect the kids because they're playing in all sun? Like the whole game's going to be something. Remember we talked about that. It was a topic we discussed last week. And I don't think it was much of a factor. I think, it was sunny and it was only 72 degrees, but it was humid. It felt humid. When you got there, it was like that sun, when it was beating through the clouds at you, it was pretty warm, and it was warm enough to overheat our camera a couple times. Like we couldn't use our sideline camera at the beginning of that game because it kept overheating.
Yeah.
And it was more just the sunlight, the direct sunlight on the players and the team that I was thinking, okay, maybe it might be an issue at some point. I remember, I think Talib El-Zakwani had some cramping issues towards the end of the game that he was dealing with, but he seemed to be fine. But that wasn't really the factor that we thought it was going to be. But, Tiffin Columbian came out with a vengeance.
Yeah.
I mean,
I was going to say, I don't know what shined brighter, the sun or that offense there in the first quarter of that game.
I mean, they put up points in bunches, but they really started out with a mission. I talked with Coach Lutz on Tuesday about, we were at the coach's corner at Benchwarmers, and we were talking about, I mentioned the fact that they had gotten off to slow starts and the fact that they, hadn't really scored much and they'd given up a lot of points in the first quarter. And, he said maybe it's just a matter of circumstance. It was just some things that happened, it's just the situations in the game.
Yeah, I think you said he didn't pay attention to that or something.
Yeah, he doesn't really pay attention to that kind of stuff. And then he comes out and puts up 21 points in the first quarter and shuts out the Flyers. So I think maybe somebody in that coaching staff might have been watching the coach's corner. Maybe, I don't know, because they really came out with a point to prove. You want
to show the highlights?
Yeah, why not? Let's go through the highlights from this Columbian game before we really get into breaking it down. 49 points on the board for the Tornadoes. And we'll go through all of them here as the first carry of the game.
Into the open to the 40, 35-30. He is gone. 15-10, 5, touchdown. Tiffin Columbian.
Wow.
The second play of the game goes for 62 yards, and the Tornadoes are on the board with 11:30 left here in the first quarter. We got Austin Rodriguez down there with him, as well as Emily Hammer, a Tiffin University intern working with us here tonight. Brockington once again on the handoff to the 40.
Almost
45-50, cuts inside,
Oh, wow.
40, and he's gone.
Well, is that little cut?
20,
That little cut that he
15,
made there.
10,
Does he have an angle?
5, touchdown.
special.
Nobody's
He really
catching
is.
him. A
The way he
78-yard
runs with the ball,
touchdown
the vision
run
he has,
for Damian Brockington.
and his speed, his breakaway speed is really what
Ball at the
separates him from
33-yard
everybody
line,
else.
inside
You
Flyer
don't
territory.
see very many running backs
Last two times
willing
they've
to
touched the ball,
get the
they've
tough
scored.
yards in the middle, but also
Literally.
have that breakaway
2 plays, 2
speed to
scores.
get to the outside.
Rogo looking down the left sideline. He's got a man. Gooding into the end zone. Touchdown, Tiffin Columbian. 3 straight plays, 3 scores. Wow.
BG3 makes it look easy as he just comes away with a huge reception on an island.
Heart of Ohio Sports gives
Here's the
fans the
commercial
access
clip.
they want
Yeah,
when they want.
we went to commercial
The
because
athletes get
they
the
had a
coverage they
long
deserve.
pause in between plays for a timeout, and then we mistakenly
really,
read the room wrong on the commercial break.
You just had to show Bill Beeston. I think that was the whole point.
That
You
was
get,
the whole
get
point.
Bill Beeston on TV here.
It
We
was
all
looking
know
good.
all know that his charisma just radiates through the screen.
I mean, you saw it there. He's
But that
looking
was
good on
a
camera.
touchdown pass to Jack Corper in the corner of the end
All
zone.
right, and
put
we're
him up
back, and while we were
28
gone,
I
to
miss
nothing.
these
Another
names,
touchdown
man.
for Tiffin
I miss these
Columbian
names.
as
These-
Yeah.
Corker,
Rogo
Gooding,
slings it into the end zone.
Brockington.
Yes.
It's like I never left.
And did you catch who caught that one?
They said we don't need an extra.
Oh, just wait. We got a Calvert game to go through. There's a
Oh,
lot of
gosh.
names there you'll remember, too.
Yeah.
That is incredible. What a half for this young man. 4:05 left.
I mean, I
to
think
go.
I
We
think
still got some
Brockington
time here to add to
is,
that.
just
lead.
from what I've seen. from
Columbia
stats,
up 28-0,
I mean,
third and goal.
You said it.
At the
He's
3.
special.
Rogo
And,
going to keep
they've
it,
got a
and
lot
he's
of special
in.
players on that offense, and
Touchdown,
it really
Tiffin
speaks
Columbian.
to
Braden
the
Rogo
development that
plunges in from
that
2
Judd
yards
has
out
really put together. I mean,
untouched. And Tiffin
I was
Columbian
there.
takes a
I was
34-0
in Tiffin
lead
when they
with
went 2 and 18, and his
3:53 left
patience
here in the first
and that
half.
staff's
What you love about
patience
this is,
and the kids' patience to fight through it and build a program the way they've built it is
Rogo
really, really
slings
special.
it into the end
You
zone.
can
He's got
tell
Bryce in the
that
back
Judd, and
corner.
we talked about it last week,
Touchdown!
whether it was
Tiffin
Steve Gilbert,
Columbian.
Larry
The
Karras, he
Brogo
learned a lot from those two
connection.
guys. Those are 2 Hall of Famers that he
Bryce.
learned from.
Yep.
Comes
And then
down
he
with
went
it
to
in the
Avon and
back of
learned
the
there
end
as
zone.
well. I mean, he's
and the
really
Tornadoes take
figured
a
it. He's
41-0
really
lead
learned a
with
lot
22 seconds
and
left here in
learned
the
on
first
his
half.
own and really turned this program around.
42-0 lead with 22 seconds in the first half. So you
Handoff,
just-
sights, untouched into the
Okay.
end
Well,
zone.
we
Got
said
a
last
touchdown.
week. We said last week. Nate and I said last week that there's not going to be a running clock between Columbian and
the
Clyde.
Tornadoes extend their lead once again.
Columbian
Now
proved us wrong.
48-0 with 39 seconds left here
Boy,
in the
but
third
you know it's a
quarter.
rivalry game.
Yeah, it is a rivalry
And when
game.
it's a rivalry game, Judd gets up for those like very few people I've ever met.
But here's the thing. This is what I keep hearing, all right? Columbian has multiple rivals, right?
Yeah.
You have a Bellevue rivalry. You have a Clyde rivalry. Sandusky rivalry. Even to some extent, you have a Perkins
Well,
rivalry
you're
now. That's
definitely going to have one with the way those two teams are playing.
Exactly. And to my point is this, I don't think any of those teams consider Columbian a rival. I don't. I think Clyde has their own rival. I think Bellevue has their own rival. Sandusky has their own rival.
I would argue the Bellevue. I would say Bellevue looks at us as a rival, but
According to Chelsea, who went to Bellevue and she transferred to Columbian for her senior year, she said it was so weird when she got to Columbian and everybody hated her because she came from Bellevue. She's like, that's weird because nobody at Bellevue even cared about Columbian. They didn't even know they existed other than on Football Friday when they had to play them that week.
Well, I think part of the issue is that specifically to Bellevue, I think part of the issue is that Bellevue has a lot of schools that they've played that are reasonably close.
Yeah.
Columbian, if you look at the NOL when I first started covering games, Columbian was in a league with with Bellevue, but also with Astoria,
Upper Sandusky.
So
Willard,
those were
Shelby.
Willard, Shelby.
yeah.
Closer.
It's closer, so that was part of it. But like Bellevue is in that other area, so they're not as in tune with what It's a different thing. They're more toward the Norwalk and they're more toward Norwalk. They're closer to Norwalk. They're closer to Sandusky. They're closer. They're very close to Perkins, obviously. Yep. Clyde. There's a bunch of schools that are right in that little triangle, especially now that they're all in the same conference.
The cluster?
Yeah. Columbian, we started doing Bellevue. Columbian started doing Bellevue because we knew that it was a big rival for Columbian.
Yeah.
And people were going to care what Bellevue did.
You're right.
Also, they are reasonably close to Seneca County. That played a role in it as well. But it was just, you look at where Bellevue is and the teams that Bellevue is close to, it's not the same teams. And meanwhile, the other teams to the west of Columbian, Fostoria and Upper Sandusky, they just kept getting smaller and then eventually went into different divisions.
Yep.
So it's a different. Who's Columbian's rival? Well, Columbian and I think Chelsea was around during the NOL days. I would imagine. I think it was close to those days. I would think, but it has changed quite a bit, and also the fact that Bellevue has been very, very, very good for a very, very, very long time.
Yes.
And Columbian has too. And there was a natural rivalry there between two Hall of Fame caliber coaches in Steve Gilbert and Ed Nasanti. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot. So for Columbian, there's a natural rival. Bellevue is probably, they've got the Sandusky thing going on. So that it's a little different, I think, geographically.
Yeah. And that's why I think it's good that Columbian considers these teams rivals because they have to get up for these games.
Yeah,
and
we just care more.
Absolutely. It's not anything against any teams. It's an observation I made. It was just one of those things. I've heard it from a couple people from Clyde as well that they don't consider Columbian a rival, but Columbian kind of considers Clyde a rivalry game.
And I think Bellevue considers Clyde a rival.
Yes, I know that is their rival.
And that's a 20-minute drive as opposed to a 40-minute drive.
Yeah.
Yep. So different.
When's Margaretta and Bellevue gonna play?
I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, that'd be close. That'd be real close, Chad.
Columbian and Calvert could be rivals too, Greg.
How about Norwalk and Monroeville, huh?
Let's go.
Now, let's talk about that. Speaking of Margaretta, let's talk about that Calvert-Margaretta game. We broke down the Columbian game. I don't think there's really a whole lot you need to analyze from that. 49-14 final score. Big time win for Columbian. You can talk about their standings, I guess. That's one thing we could discuss as well. Briefly, we'll talk about they're in Region 10, and Tiffin Columbian sitting at number 3 in Region 10 behind Toledo Central Catholic and Norton. Medina Buckeye behind them, and Mansfield Senior at number 5. But that's about where you would expect Tiffin Columbian to be in the pecking order right now. And this is a team that they've got some tough matchups coming up. Obviously, Bellevue is a rivalry game for them. And then they have Sandusky Perkins looming at the end of the season. And you don't want to overlook Norwalk because this is a team that, they can put up some points. They put up 40 points in a game already this year, but they've also been blanked a few times. So it's something that you got to keep an eye on, but you don't want to fall into that trap game. Like the Bellevue game's a rivalry game. Norwalk might get overlooked, but I don't think with Judd Lutz's staff, I don't think he's going to allow them to overlook anything. They're one play at a time, one day at a time, one game at a time.
But we can overlook things.
Yes.
And
as media guys.
Not to.
I'm looking at that Week 10 matchup.
Yeah, I think we all.
Give me Sandusky Perkins and Columbian as the matchup for the Lake title, and give me Calvert and Hopewell as the matchup for the River title.
Yeah, and I think that that's the thing. It's like when people say, "Well, the fans shouldn't overlook." I'm like, it doesn't really matter whether the fans overlook things or not. They don't have any impact on the games being played. What matters is if the players overlook them, if the coaches overlook them, and I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, no, they won't let it happen. I know that coaching staff. They will not allow that to happen. So, they got a couple games before that Perkins game, but this is a good looking team right now, and I think they're really clicking on all cylinders. They're clicking at the right time, if you will. So excited about these next 3 games for Tiffin Columbian. We'll be at all 3. The Adrenaline Stream will be there next week for the Bellevue game, and then the X Stream will be covering the Norwalk game, and then we'll be back at Frost Calloway Stadium with the Adrenaline Stream for the Perkins game. So.
Well, it's that time of year, isn't it?
It is. It is.
It feels like football season always goes too fast.
Yeah. How did we just get through Week 7?
We are.
It is
coming
hard.
up on Week
Unreal.
8.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, I think we started the game. We started this season in about April, but
it feels like it.
It does go quick, and 7 weeks through.
I was gonna say, especially around here. Yeah.
Well, I was gonna say for us, it was like June 9th was the last day for baseball, and then June 10th was when football season started. Pretty much. Yeah. But, let's talk about that Calvert-Margaretta game last night. So the Senecas come into that game after having the game before canceled against St. Joe. And then, Margaretta comes in after, they had kind of taken a beating from Hopewell Loudon the week before in the first half, and then shut them out in the second half and put up 14 points on the board in the second half. Similar to the way it played out last night, except for Calvert was only up 14-0 at halftime. Margaretta comes out and catches them off guard. Well, you know what, Greg? Why don't we just show the replays on this? Do we have replays?
I do, but it's just Calvert stuff. I didn't clip it. I just running out of time. But
because that game, the surprise of the game was at halftime. The Polar Bears came out with an idea that, hey, we need the ball back, and we need it back quickly. And so they came out, and instead of onside kicking, they just kicked it off one of the return men, one of the up men who was up front. Yeah, and it bounced off of him, and then they recovered it.
It's like within the first 5 minutes of the second half, it went from 14-0 to 14-14.
The one thing is, if you put the ball on the ground with the bounces, especially on the turf field, you've got a chance. Last night at the game that I was at, McComb fumbled the kickoff just because it was hard for the players to figure out the bounces when they squibbed it. And in that situation, they were going to squib it because they had a kick return. Arlington had a kick return for a touchdown against them. So you're going to do that. But it's a little bit harder for guys because, again, if you squib it in the right spot, you might get somebody fielding a kick who doesn't usually field kicks.
Yeah.
And that can lead to some strange
was Xavier
things.
Kimmett on the hit.
Some weird bounces.
It really does. And it's got that weird
left side complete,
but Kimmett was just all over those wide receiver screens.
Well, I just want to thank Steve Reeser for wearing jerseys with white numerals.
For that little sling back behind the line of scrimmage.
They're great jerseys. They're easy to read. The only thing, when the smaller players get their jerseys scrunched, the inks look like twos sometimes. That's the only thing.
We go through that too when you try to identify pictures for the paper. When the jerseys get scrunched like that of 6s and 9s and 3s, it all gets a little bit confused.
Schultz takes the snap.
But
hand off to Warnerman.
I remember
off the left side,
years ago, Calvert had the dark gray
He's
jerseys
to the 30,
with the blue
25,
numerals.
and he's
Those were
gone.
possible.
10-5 touchdown.
Yeah.
Cal
The
Warnerman.
gray with the dark blue numbers.
Yeah.
As soon as they started sweating, it all just turned to
Well,
dark.
and it might have been
Cal Warnerman
Fox
from
who told me that
35 yards out.
Maybe he told me this. Maybe not. I can't
And the
remember.
Senecas on top.
Somebody told me that one of the reasons they did it was
5:40
because it was
left here in
hard
the
for
first half.
opposing teams to look at the tape and figure out who was doing
Pump
what.
fake.
Yeah.
Now over the middle, he's got Schumacher at the 30, 25,
And this was after
20,
they had tied the
15,
game
10,
up.
5,
Yeah, so
touchdown,
Calvert responded here.
Tiffin Calvert
They said, hey, we got to get
on
this. They got to get this lead back.
The
Yeah.
Senecas strike from 66
strike
yards
downfield
out.
there.
Just see
And
look on
the
Eric's
Polar
face
Bears
when it
caught
went down to
sleeping
him.
in
He's
the
like,
secondary.
Drawing him in for a screen to kind of like a post go.
And they bit on the pump fake, and that's what left the defender 1st and 10 at the 17. Schultz in the pistol, 2 backs in the backfield. Handoff.
Was his
Run
brother
back,
the
bounces it to the
quarterback at one
outside.
time?
He's
Jack
got
Schultz
blockers
and then
to the
Harrison.
10.
Yep.
Inside
Harrison.
the 10 to the 5.
Jack was
and he's
there
down
when I was there.
inside the
Jack, we
5.
called him
They'll mark him out
JYD,
of
the
bounds
junkyard
at about
dog.
the 2-yard line.
And so Harrison is the magic man because
Handoff.
Harry, and
it's
sometimes
a
he gets out of
touchdown.
crazy
Tiffin
situations. We call
Calvert.
Harry Houdini.
Oh, okay.
So that just became the magic man.
Wow, they just imposed their will on that touchdown drive.
Cal Warnament plunges in from 2 yards out.
We're Warnament. Now,
And I'll
there's
tell
a
you
name I
what,
haven't
Tommy.
heard.
Yeah, Warnament had 2
number
touchdowns
71
last night, over 150 total yards
was, on the other
between
end of a
on the
pancake
ground
right
and through the
there.
air. He had an excellent game last night.
As
Well,
they
they've
really
got,
set the
you know,
edge
the
there on
thing
the
about
left
Calvert
side.
this year is
Cam
this was
Moyer.
amazing. I got a text from Matt and I this morning. Calvert hasn't
Open
been
up a can of
6-0
Chef Morardi.
since
Oh,
2001.
Unable to
Which
convert
I
on
surprises
extra
me
points,
because
so
I
it
remember some of
stays
Todd
a
Fox's
27-14
teams
ball game.
in the early parts of the 2010s that were pretty darn good.
Yeah.
And I could have sworn that they were 6-0, but no. This is the first time in over 2 decades. And
Yes.
good job, you know, especially after last year. This is a really nice comeback season for Calvert.
It really is.
Yeah.
And, you know, this is a team that we've seen it coming with them. With this, the last year's team, there was so much promise. There was a couple of seniors on that team that kind of helped guide the ship, and, you know, they leaned on them when they needed to. But the juniors in that class, and even some of the freshmen from last year's group, have really stepped up this year as seniors and sophomores to kind of fill valuable voids that have been there for this team, because they really haven't, over the years, they haven't had a line like this since Reeser's been there. I don't think they've had a line that's been able to control and dominate in the trenches and dictate their game plan, because they can do whatever they want to do when they want to do it with that line. Against just about any opponent they've tried to face so far, nobody's really been able to match up with them. Now, Margaretta gave them some push last night. They really did. It was a game that, you know, at first I didn't know how it was going to go because Calvert kind of was bullying their way around and pushing them around in the trenches. But after halftime, something happened with those Polar Bears. They were ignited. They were on fire.
Well, maybe
And-
that's become their calling card after the last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
You know, I remember the interview from that I think Matt did where he said, where their coach for Margaretta said, you know, we didn't get off the bus. We felt like we didn't get off the bus. So kind of, you know, you wonder if, I mean, there's a difference between being a second half team and a team that gets off to such a slow start that it's hard to come back.
Well, look at these numbers. Just not to interrupt you, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine.
But Margaretta in the second half has outscored their opponents 73 to, let's see, that is 48. So yeah, they are a team that puts up points in the second half and limits the opposing team. They have played an overtime game this year, but I mean, I'll tell you, that's a team I don't want to play this time of year. It's a team that their record is deceptive enough to make everybody on the team think this is a win. We got this.
Well, yeah, and I mean,
You know what I mean?
If you're a team that's good at making adjustments at halftime, imagine the
Yes.
adjustments you can make this late into the season against your opponents. Hey,
Yeah, Gary Quizno and that coaching staff, they did a great job last night. They had a good game plan. They limited Calvert's offense for the first time this year. They forced Harry Schultz into a couple of turnovers that we're not used to seeing. He'd only had 2 picks the whole year before that.
Right.
He threw 2 last night. So that Margaretta defense had a game plan. They executed. But when it came down to it, Tiffin Calvert had the extra that you needed to get you over the top. And
Right.
this is that team this year that I think Steve Reeser's been building for the last, I think he's been there 8 years now. He's been building it to this point, and I think they are a mirror image of what he wants out of a football team. So it's exciting to see, and I'm excited to see how this team finishes out the season. They still got 3 more games to go. Like we mentioned, they've got Woodmore next week. We will not be there for that because I don't like it when people tune out after halftime. We will be there for the Willard game at home at Frost County Stadium, and I have confirmed it with Hopewell Loudon. We will be there for week 10 for the Hopewell Loudon and Calvert game. So
I just had somebody ask on this question where we were going to be for week 10, and I just
yes,
told them that.
we're going to be at both places. We initially intended to be at Seneca East and Cary, but after reaching out and talking with Brian Calatrulio, he has told us that we're welcome back. And so we would like to be back over there for that one because that's the marquee matchup that week.
I was going to say, we haven't had a chance to cover them yet this season, and why not on week 10 in the marquee matchup, like you said?
No, week 10, and there's going to be a lot of good games week 10. Mm-hmm. Just kind of the way that it, that's when you get kind of the top teams and the rivals and all that stuff. A lot of that going on.
Whoever did the schedule for the SBC this year really knew what they were doing when they put those two matchups in week 10 with Columbian and Perkins and Calvert and Hopewell. I don't know, maybe the schedule was made way ahead of time, but it just seemed like there was some foreshadowing there because those are a couple of really marquee matchups in the state of Ohio. We talked about the games that we were at. Let's go around the area and just look at some of the other scores from our area, and then we'll just kind of wrap things up here today. So we do have, let's see, final scores from the Huron and Bellevue. The Tigers beat Bellevue 37-18. Bellevue's kind of fallen off these last few weeks here as they had an injury to, I think Jax Lapata is the one that went down with an injury, and he's kind of like the cog of that offense and defense. He's a really key contributor for them. Obviously, Lapata, that's a name everybody knows from Bellevue. So it's a tough loss for them. But, this is it's a hard time of the year to be trying to get healthy, you know? Everybody's hurt. Everybody's banged up. And Huron with a big win over Bellevue last night. Bellevue falls to 3-4 on the season. They face Tiffin Columbian. It doesn't get any easier from this point out for them.
And really the SBC Lake is a very, very, very tough conference. It's an exciting time for that conference because it seems like a lot of teams, even the teams that are struggling a little bit, they're still pretty tough. Teams like Norwalk, teams like, Clyde had a rough game last night. But these are still teams that you don't necessarily want to see. And when you're banged up, and if you might be more banged up than some other teams, then it really becomes a problem.
Yeah. Calvert has Woodmore next, and then Willard, and then Hopewell Loudon. And then Hopewell has St. Joe, Woodmore, and Calvert. So pretty familiar or pretty similar paths to the end of the season for both teams. Fremont Ross picks up a win over Clay last night, 41-28.
The Chadlong Express, is that right?
Well, that's her second win of the year. I think they're 2-5 now on the season. So Perkins with a win over Edison, previously undefeated Edison. 49-14 was the final in that one. And then you had Cary.
Perkins just keeps rolling.
Yeah, they're a buzzsaw.
It's a train that's going, and it's good luck. You know, I mean, it is going to be exciting to see when Columbian goes up against them because it's almost becoming like a legend every week the way they're destroying people every single week. And so you wonder, we know that Columbian is a good football team, possibly a great football team. So you wonder what's going to happen when those two Titans meet up in week 10.
Yeah.
I just was talking in cliches there, but I really did mean what I was saying.
No, you're right. And we'll keep going around the area.
Do a Clash of the Titans poster or Mega Powers Explode type of thing. Do a little pro wrestling thing with that one.
But there were a couple of exciting games in the area last night. Cary and Mohawk was kind of tight for most of the game. The Blue Devils pulled away at the end, but I mean that was a tightly contested game for most of it. That's a classic N10 rivalry matchup.
And even when you look at Cary, Cary knew going in it was going to be tough. Well, those two teams know each other so well. They're both pretty well coached. It's been a tough year for Mohawk.
It really has.
And it's I'm sure it's frustrating for them because it's not like Mohawk. I mean, not that you want to get blown out every week, but when you know you're that close to winning games, they're very close to winning a few more games and maybe being in a position to talk about a postseason run. As it is, they've dropped a lot of close games. Well, you just went up against a team that's one of the better teams in Northwest Ohio, and you played with them for the majority of the game, and it's just been very, very frustrating losses for them, very close losses, and it's a different type of frustration. There's the Fostoria frustration where they are playing when they play the top teams in the league, they can't compete.
Yeah.
And then there's the frustration for Mohawk where they can compete, they're just not winning. they're different types of things.
And they're so close. Like you said, Zach, 3 out of their 6 losses have come within 5 points or less.
Yeah.
And then 5 of those losses, 5 of the 6 losses, they actually were within a score in the second half. So it's just frustrating when you see this team has some potential. It's just there's a lot of young talent on that team, and they're really looking for size. They need some size going into next year to kind of bulk up in the trenches. They're always a tough team. They're always a physical team, but when it comes to size, it doesn't. Sometimes it does matter when it comes to high school football, especially in the trenches.
Yeah, I think it's especially in the N10.
Yes.
When you're playing Carey.
Yes.
Carey is
always
Carey's
huge.
Colonel Crawford.
Jeez.
I mean, these guys are.
At Seneca East, there's big kids at every one of those schools. I mean, it looks like there's 20 kids that are 6 foot or above.
In the N10, the way that those offenses are run, you win and lose games in the trenches.
Yeah.
And physicality. We know Mohawk's kids are tough. They've shown it this year how tough they are. Mm-hmm. But sometimes it's just a matter of physics. It is size. I mean, it is weight. It is the beef up front that makes the difference.
Exactly. So Mohawk has Seneca East at home this week. That's a big rivalry matchup. It always is. It's always a close game. Seneca East at 4-3. Mohawk now at 1-6 on the season. We'll have that game for you right here on Heart of Ohio Sports. That'll be on the X stream this week, as we'll have Columbian and Bellevue on the Adrenaline stream. So Mohawk has Seneca East next, and then Colonel Crawford, and then they close out the season at Bucyrus. Just like you said, a frustrating season for the Warriors, but a chance to finish with a little bit of momentum if they can pick up a couple wins here down the stretch. They got Seneca East. Colonel Crawford would be a huge win for them if they could pull that one off. And then Bucyrus at the end of the year, a chance to kind of gain some momentum going into next year. Ben Bogner, the junior quarterback, he's shown a lot this year, and they've kind of leaned on him heavily in the offensive game plan. I think next year they're going to see a lot more of their offensive weapons kind of gain from the experience that they've had this year, and you're going to see them take another step next year. I think this is a team that they're going to be a lot better next year. For sure.
There is Mohawk. It's Mohawk.
They don't stay down long. If they are down,
no. This is one of the top teams, whether it's the MIL, the N10, what have you. This is Eric Daniel, and this is. This is the guys that they have and the coaches that they've had and the attitudes, but the attitude stays the same.
Yes.
They're tough-minded kids, and they're gonna bring it every week.
Exactly.
And those are cliches, but the fact of the matter is, you don't want to play Mohawk.
No.
And even at 1-6, you don't want to play Mohawk.
Here's another team you don't want to play, Sandusky, right now. After putting up 35 against Columbian last week, they put up 48 on Norwalk. 48-12 was the final in that one. The Blue Streaks, 4-3, quietly making a little run here as I don't want to say his name because I always murder it, but Coach Pajali, I think it's that how you say it? Poggiali. I don't know.
Yeah,
Sandusky's coach. We'll say that because Sandusky's coach is doing a great job over there of redirecting that program, and kind of he really has built this from the ground up. And it's a young team. They're getting a lot of experience down the stretch, and they are jockeying for a playoff spot here at the end of the year. So this is valuable experience for them. And let's see. I think that's pretty much it. Oh, Seneca East over Bucyrus, 44-14. Tigers moved to 4-3 on the season. That was their homecoming night last night. Port Clinton, after being down 14-0 to Vermilion, comes back to win 24-21. We mentioned the Hopewell Loudon 72-33 over Willard. And then another game that was really, that was a close game, was the Monroeville Western Reserve game. And Monroeville coming out with the win at the end of the game. Talk about these Eagles, just briefly, Zach. From an 0-10 team to now, I think they're 5-2 on the year. Are you surprised?
I think I am surprised, because anytime that a team makes a jump like that, it's pretty impressive. But I think that the one thing that you have over there is teams that are used to competing, and teams that are used to so it's when you have a bad year like that also, and we saw this with Columbian, when you have a bad year like that, you come back hungry.
Yes.
Especially when you have the tradition. And, that makes a big difference as well.
And Monroeville was coming off a loss to Lucas the week before by just 3 points. Their 2 losses are by a combined 4 points. They lost the one to Calvert by 1 point, and they lost to Lucas last week by 3 points. They come back and they beat Western Reserve, who was 5-1 going into the game. 44-36 was the final. They have Mapleton next week, and that is going to be an emotional game. Let me just say that. Prayers and thoughts go out to the Mapleton program and everyone affected by what happened last night. I won't explain, but if you need to, you can search. I shared it on my personal page, on my Facebook page, if you can go find that. But yeah, thoughts and prayers go out to the Mapleton community and everyone affected by the tragedy last night. So that's going to be an emotional game for Monroeville next week. And then you have Plymouth and St. Paul to close out the season. This Monroeville team under Tyler Nestor, they're really starting to make some noise in Region 25, and he's got them positioned to possibly be one of the teams hosting a playoff game. They're sitting there at number 7 in Region 25. So, I mean, we picked them at the beginning of the year in a couple of games that, we were covering because I didn't know, but I thought they were going to be pretty decent. They should be good games. Well, both of them were great games, and I tell you, this is a team that a lot of people overlooked at the beginning of the year, but I'm telling you, I don't think anybody's overlooking them now. No. Nobody wants to face them as they're going into the playoffs. So, all right, well, briefly, let's break down the 2 college games we have going on because the 2 local colleges are away this week. You have a Findlay game at home, right?
Yeah, Findlay has their homecoming today. Excuse me. Findlay has their homecoming today against they got Kentucky Wesleyan.
Okay.
They've been on the road. Findlay's been on the road for 3 weeks. They won all 3 of those games. They're 3-1 coming in, and offense has really been clicking very well. And they've got a pretty good chance, I think, to move to 4-1 today.
Okay,
Yeah.
Nice. So we'll look at Heidelberg's playing Muskingum. They're at Muskie. That's a 1:30 start, and Heidelberg 2-1 on the season after falling to John Carroll last week. Tiffin University will travel to Kentucky to face Thomas More. And that game is at 7 o'clock. It's a nighttime game. And, of course, you can always tune in to WTUD. You can find the app. Just search for WTUD or Dragon Radio app. You listen to Russ Snyder on the call with that one as they are on the road. And I believe you can actually find that on Coast Country as well, 100.9 FM, if you want to listen along to the broadcast.
Yeah, that should be an interesting game. Thomas More is they're new. They're new to the GMAC. And of course, they've got some names. They've got some names that people are familiar with in the past. I mean, Mike Hallett, I said, the former Heidelberg coach. He was the coach of Thomas More, and I believe Brian Moore, who was the offensive coordinator at Heidelberg and later the head coach at Wilmington, he's now on the coaching staff over at Thomas More.
Nice.
So some local connections with that program.
Nice. All right. So once again, Tiffin University taking on Thomas More today at 7 o'clock. That's pretty much going to do it for us this week. No Ohio State game today as they're off. Usually when they don't play, I wear my jersey. I don't know why. It's just a weird thing I've always done. When they have a bye week, I wear this number 7 jersey. It's the old Chris Gamble jersey I bought back in the day at the stadium. But this is, I encourage you to go back and watch any of the games that we broadcast last night. We have uploaded the full game from the Lakota-Gibsonburg game. We did have some internet issues last night that we were dealing with, but the full game has been uploaded to YouTube. You can find that on our X Stream channel. Search Heart of Ohio Sports X Stream, and you can find that game in its entirety that we just uploaded earlier this morning. You can also go back and watch the both of the games from last night on the Adrenaline Stream. Those are on YouTube and Facebook. And while you're there, share the videos and like, follow, subscribe to us on all of our platforms. Tomorrow, Dog Pound Press Box, 1 o'clock. Browns versus Ravens. We'll be right back here in Studio Squared. And Greggy, you ready for that one?
Oh yeah, dude. I just had to stop myself from saying a bunch of curse words right there. That's all, but you know what I'm gonna say?
Yeah.
I'm just gonna. Oh. It's like you asked me how I feel about that, and it's like the rat birds.
I like that. All right, folks, that's going to do it for us today. You've been watching the Saturday Scoreboard. Once again, share the video if you made it this far. Thank you for watching. Zach, thanks for joining us once again this week.
Thanks so much for having me. Yeah,
absolutely. And thanks to the wizard, Greg Kinn, for making us look good. Once again, thanks for watching here on Heart of Ohio Sports. Have a great day.